My reaction, having looked at the weather maps, without seeing the computer, was we had to go west. It was the only place to go.
I don't understand why everybody didn't go that way. I mean, to me, you look at the maps, you look at the weather, and it's pretty bloody obvious to go that way. That was the only breeze in town.
We fired it into the computer, and the program also said go west. Now, it's quite often wrong on the computer, and we don't even use the results. This time, early in the race, it said go the same way. Even more radical, in fact. So we said, right, what have we got to lose? Go. And the wind changed, as we were predicting, within the hour of when it was supposed to change. About 48 hours later, it was game, set, match.
Steinlager 2's lone path southwest down the Atlantic produced exactly the result Blake wanted, a huge lead. Within a few days, he had a 100-mile break on the rest of the fleet. To Mike Quilter, it almost seemed too good to be true, and he started to worry about being so far from the other boats.
That's the first time I've navigated around the world, so I get a little bit nervous, but good old Blakey, you know, he's had 20 years, and he comes up and settles me down a little bit and says, don't worry, you know, no, we'll be right. So, yes, at one stage I wanted to jibe back in to get in touch with the guys again, the other guys, but Blakey said, no, let's stick to our guns, and yeah, it was pretty good.
Again, Blake's instincts were right. In more wind than the rest of the fleet, Steinlager 2 increased its lead to 260 miles. Then Big Red struck the doldrums and the equator, King Neptune's realm. Off the coast of Brazil, Steinlager 2 at times resembled a submarine in conditions the crew called the green room, literally surrounded by walls of water. Also off Brazil, fisherman Peichel suffered serious problems with a broken mizzen. Then it was Steinlager 2's turn for some bad luck. A pin holding the mainsail fell out in the middle of the night. After hours aloft, the crew managed to get the mainsail back up. The rest of the fleet escaped the gale and started to close the gap. But there was no catching Steinlager 2, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, Big Red sailed into Punta del Este after nearly 26 days at sea. Even the computer hadn't predicted a finish that fast.
A few times, we got caught with everything up in 38 knots of wind, and the speedo just sitting solid on 18 knots, solid. And that's going pretty fast.
Blake received the Beefeater Trophy as leg winner. His crew joined him with their first beer for a month. The Swiss sloop Merit arrived 11.5 hours behind Steinlager 2, and skipper Pierre Fellman was painfully aware of just how fast the Kiwi catch was.
And I think to beat Steinlager, they have to broke something.
After 25 days at sea, any port would have looked good, but for the crew of Steinlager 2, Punta del Este in sunshine was paradise. Their idea of relaxation was to take on the other crews in a 5-kilometre road race.
Here we have a Dick. You're a grind, Sheila. Here we go. Here's Rose.
And by night, the crew took on the role of cultural ambassadors and showed the locals how Kiwi musicians strut their stuff. The 7,700-mile second leg from Punta del Este to Fremantle, Western Australia, began on October the 28th. Of the fleet, only two, Steinlager and La Poste, did not change crew for the notorious Southern Ocean. Many of the boats had significant crew changes, and 4 new skippers. For the Soviet skipper of Fazizi, the stresses of ocean racing had proved too much, and sadly, he took his own life. One reason for Blake not adding to his crew was that he didn't want the extra 200 to 300 kilograms of weight each extra person would mean. And He also had a definite policy of making no changes to his crew during the race.
We weren't taking passengers. We weren't having people leaving the boat because they were discontented or they didn't want to be part of the project or they didn't like the skipper and so they decided to leave after leg 2 or whatever.
Blake and Quilter had agreed on a strategy for the second leg that was fundamentally different to their nothing-to-lose approach to the first.
We had a marvellous lead. It was time to consolidate, retrench a bit, just sail the similar part of the ocean to the other boats, not try going off somewhere else, even if we felt it was the best way to go.
Steinlager 2 led the fleet for the first few days out of Punta del Este, but a split in the winds pushed Steinlager east while the rest of the fleet went south. Fisher and Peichel, working hard to recover the time lost in the first leg, hit the front.
We got a funny weather pattern which held us north. We couldn't get south. They got south easily and suddenly got a better breeze than we did. And then finally, the only way we could get to the same position north-south as they were was to lose 30 miles. And we had a discussion about it. All the crew were involved. We have to get further south. We're losing miles up here. We're fortunate the boat has got the speed to get back out of some of those situations. And the crew have got the guts and the nous not to worry that they're behind a little bit.
This was the Whitbread's longest and toughest leg ever. There's nothing like the Southern Ocean. It has no land masses to restrain it, and with seas of up to 15 metres, it was living up to its grueling reputation. Even on quieter days, there were hazards. Whales are the sort of company that can quite playfully cause enough damage to sink a yacht.
Here we have a free crew in the Southern Ocean to take you on a little tour of Steinlager 2. And there's Kevin Shoebridge. He's on standby. He's fully kitted up and ready to go. Just a coiled spring. Round underneath that space blanket is Barry Mackay. Looks like a bit of rotisserie chicken at the moment. But he's under there because there's condensation dripping down on top of him. And it's only about 2 degrees inside the boat. Here's the head with all its ancillary pipes and valves. You need a bit of a plumber's degree to operate it. And it's a pretty cold seat at this part of the race. Back to the rotisserie chicken. Let's see who's really under there.
Let's see.
Feel his tender timer. It's Barry Mackay.
Not quite done yet.
Not quite done. Heading off down the starboard side. There's no one on the starboard side really at the moment. That's the downward side of the boat. We try to keep everyone on the weather side. We'll whip into the nav station here. The nav station's empty at the moment. Okay, we're in the galley now. Cole's preparing lunch. 3 sinks there. 1 for dirty dishes, 1 for washing and 1 for draining. Gas detector above the stove. Exhaust pipes going out both sides of the hull. Oh, and by the way, the curved bits on the side, they're for keeping the water out, and that's cooled the hull. And the flat bits on the top, that's the deck. And that's for keeping guys up there instead of down here. Otherwise they'll be walking all over the guys on the top of their bunks. Engine's underneath there. It's our only drying device. It's an upside down food basket with the engine box fan piping warm air out of the engine box. It's a bit of a token gesture really. Your gloves and your socks are pretty well always wet. So walk right around the front of the mast, and there's the water maker. Controls, filters, and the membranes are just behind that little bulkhead there.
The further south they got, the colder the crew got. and Blake had to acknowledge the weight-saving policy had created a problem.
In leg 2, we made a basic mistake. We should have had a heating system on this boat. You know, being the gung-ho Kiwis and the young guys, and no, we don't want a heating system, we don't need heating, because the guys who were on line in New Zealand, the boat was fully heated, so I don't remember what the cold was about, because it didn't really affect them too much. And leg 2 of this round the world race was much colder again, and much windier, and it went on and on and on. And the guys clammed up. I mean, some people hardly spoke for days and days on end. We were starting to get worried by them, you know. I wasn't up on deck for the hours that some of the watchers were. They were having to take the hardship more than I was. I was downstairs a lot of the time working on where we should go. Can we stay south for as long? Should we go further south and put the guys into even more intense cold, or will they, you know, stop completely? Will everything come to a grinding halt? Those conditions do put far more stress on one, because, you know, are we in the right part of the ocean? Are we going to slam into an iceberg because people aren't keeping a very good watch because they're basically gone gaga?
The fleet had been warned before they left Punta del Este that the Antarctic ice pack extended much further north than usual. Beneath the Cape of Good Hope, it had extended as high as 54 degrees south. For days on end, Steinlager sailed before 25 to 35 knots, surfing down the sides of huge waves in pursuit of the yachts ahead. For the whole fleet, dodging icebergs was a fact of everyday life. And while the larger bergs showed up on radar, smaller floes, which could do as much damage, did not. As the fleet moved from the Southern Ocean to the high-pressure systems of the Indian Ocean, 2 days out of Fremantle, Steinlager 2 was second, when Blake and Quilter decided to put what they'd learnt about light air sailing on Steinlager 1 into practice.
The trimaran paid off. We owed everything to the multi-hull. Brad's watch were on and they had a spinnaker, and we were doing about 5 or 6 knots and 5 knots of air. We said, well, this doesn't feel right. Why don't we do what we do in the trimaran? Let's take the spinnaker off and put a headsail on, a big light headsail. Let's put a different mizzen staysail on. We'll pull everything into the middle. We'll bring the boat round so it's going more into the wind, so we're going away from where we want to go. Let's get a bit of speed on and then see what happens, come back onto course. So, a bit of discussion, a few interested looks. And we did it. And suddenly we're going down track, closer to the course we want to go at 7.5 knots instead of 5 to 6 knots. And the other boats didn't do this. So straight away we had nearly a 2-knot advantage on the rest of the fleet. And over a 24-hour period, there's your win. From that time onwards, we didn't sail that boat any other way until near the finish, and we altered our thinking again. And the rest of the fleet gradually cottoned on over the next 20,000 miles.
Just before daybreak, Steinlager 2 took the gun for the second leg for a great tactical victory. But Peter Blake acknowledged he wasn't quite sure they'd won until crossing the line.
We still didn't know when we came past Rottnest Island whether we had anyone in front of us, and only actually when we heard the gun that we were comfortable.
One of the Whitbread race rules was that each boat had to be check measured during the race. Earlier animosity towards Steinlager 2 resurfaced.
The rest of the boats, when they were measured, the measurers were told if they're within 15 or 20 millimetres of measurement in the water, that's fine. We were 3 millimetres out, and suddenly I got a telephone call to say we've got a problem with your rating. What a load of bullshit. And they need to have rules that apply to everybody, not just because someone's got a snitcher on or someone has been pressurised by one of the cigarette companies who's made a huge mistake with their boat, got the wrong people, got the wrong design, basically blown it, and are starting to try and find ways of justifying it. And I got very annoyed because you couldn't get a fairer boat than we've got here.
The third leg from Fremantle to Auckland had a special importance for the Kiwi catchers. No New Zealand yacht had ever been first into the City of Sails during a Whitbread. In 1985, Blake had had some bad luck heading for Auckland and Lion, New Zealand, hitting a whale while travelling at nearly 12 knots and damaging the rudder. This time round, with Steinlager 2 and Fisher and Paykel both wanting to be first into Auckland, the fight was really on. The two catchers rocketed across the Tasman, sometimes within 10 metres of each other, surfing it over. Lightweight Charles Jourdan led much of the way to Tasmania, but was put out of contention when a big whale hit the French sloop off the coast of New Zealand. A thrilling duel developed between Steinlager 2 and Fisher and Paykel coming down the east coast of New Zealand from Cape Reinga to Auckland. Steinlager was defending a narrow lead when a decisive moment came for Blake.
Coming past Kowau when the breeze started to freshen a bit, and there's this black wall in front of us over the wall of boats. So I said to Mike, well, look, just go and have a listen on the radio downstairs because something's happening up in front and you might just hear someone talking about it. And he popped his head up a couple of minutes later and said, look, some guy in town has just said that the wind's gone into the southwest and it's blowing pretty hard. And we said, OK, we'll get everything ready for the emergency drop scenario. And I picked up the binoculars and this guy, only half a mile ahead, he had the wind from the opposite direction blowing hard. And so we went straight into the emergency procedure, and I think the guys in the boat behind us on Fisher and Paykel could not believe what they were seeing. It was, why are we dropping our sails off? 10 seconds later they understood why. And game, set and match. It was great.
Caught by the vicious squall, Fisher and Paykel was not prepared and lost its spinnaker in the water. Steinlager had won again, sailing into Auckland to be greeted by a huge hometown welcome just a few minutes ahead of Fisher and Paykel. It was a spectator fleet like never before, and Aucklanders thronged every possible vantage point for a glimpse of their heroes. For the Steinlager 2 crew, it was an unforgettable welcome, but Blake was generous in victory.
The guys behind us, you know, they deserve just as much, though. What a battle inside of each other for 3,500 miles.
The fourth Whitbread leg took the fleet back to Punta del Este via the rigours of the Southern Ocean. For the Card, it began badly. The third catch in the race collided with a spectator craft and lost the mizzen. The Swedish yacht had been reduced to a sloop. Even with a record 8,000 spectator craft farewelling them, it was hard for Steinlager 2's crew to leave the comforts of home in the height of summer.
You don't like seeing the mountains and hills of Aotearoa going to the sunset in the evening, and you're going back down south again, an area you hate really. And you don't want to go. You don't want to say goodbye to the family. The last thing you want to do is carry on this damn round the world race, but you have to. Because how can you let 400,000 people down? How can you let a country down? Because everyone wants you to win.
As they sailed away from home, navigator Mike Quilter was much more relaxed than he had been on the second leg through the same ocean.
The second leg was the worst leg of the race. Really hard sailing, bad weather, lots of ice, really cold. Fourth leg is late summer, less ice, less storms, a lot nicer sailing, and a bit of a one-way track.
But whatever the season, the Southern Ocean is still the Southern Ocean.
Really disappointed with this leg, Bill. We come to the Southern Ocean and we haven't seen one bloody iceberg. Not one. Not one.
Cape Horn is sailing's most famous landmark, but the waters round the Horn have been a graveyard for sailing vessels for centuries. Those who survive a rounding of the Horn are a special breed, and Blake was invited to scatter the ashes of an old Cape Horner. Off the Argentine coast, disaster for Martella, losing its keel and overturning. The crew was safely rescued by Merritt and Charles Jourdan. After yet another titanic struggle with Fisher and Paykel, Steinlager 2 sailed into Punta del Este after 22 days at sea. There was certainly no shortage of gin on the Kiwi catch. Once on shore, though, the Steinlager crew just couldn't stay away from water. And it seemed if there was a race, no matter what kind, they were in it. On the 17th of March 1990, the fifth leg from Punta del Este to Florida began. It was the first time the Whitbread course had included the United States, and the route conditions were in complete contrast to the Southern Ocean legs.
It was a leg where we, I think, reefed once or twice. It was boring, it was hot. We left all our seawater soap behind so we couldn't have a decent wash without raiding the cook's supplies. And we're just pleased to get into Florida. And there are periods when you wonder how you're going to go through the next day. We might maybe read all the books on the boat, and we were down to reading the packets of cereals, you know, the Whitbread packets for something to do.
If the fifth leg was pretty dull for the rest of the crew, patchy wind conditions made it much more of a challenge for Mike Quilter than he had anticipated.
Couldn't see anything on the weather maps. You couldn't see anything in the sky about why there was these big holes everywhere. So I actually got, I mean, if I was ever going to get ulcers in this race, I'd get it on that leg. That turned out to be quite scary. In the end, we just snuck in there, but it was close.
British sloop Rothmans had led the fleet for a week, but once round the top of Brazil, it was clear the reaching conditions suited the ketches. After 22 and a half days, Steinlager 2 sailed into Fort Lauderdale, first past the post yet again, with the bridge over Florida's intercoastal waterway raised in salute. With one leg to go, Steinlager 2 had an overall lead of 35 hours. But did Blake consider the Whitbread one?
When we get to Southampton, I'll let you know. But until you get there, no, you certainly haven't. I mean, it's like a racing car driver. You might lose all your oil on the last lap, and that's the end of you.
Before the vital sixth leg, time to relax and recharge in Florida.
Cheers, Bez. Cheers, mate.
As they began the sixth and final Whitbread leg, Peter Blake knew the only way they could lose was if Steinlager broke something. So Blake set an ultra-conservative policy.
From Florida to England, when the wind got strong, we throttled right back, pulled the throttles right out and slowed right down. We did not want to have any breakage problems at all.
Sailing across the Gulf Stream, they encountered currents which were running at up to 4 knots against the wind, building up short, sharp seas, which didn't have a big enough gap between waves to allow Steinlager to get down one before it was hit by another. Suddenly, failure of the mizzen chainplate, the fitting that holds the stays of the mizzen mast to the deck, and that put Steinlager in grave danger of losing both masts.
The seas were coming at the boat even though the wind was from the opposite direction, and we had a big spinnaker on in the middle of the night, and a big mizzen stator like the big bright red mizzen spinnaker, and the boat was leaping out of the seas and going wham, crash, bang, and the sails were going crack. I mean, the rig was coming under enormous load, and suddenly there was one big bang which was louder than the rest, and we shot up on deck, and the mizzen chainplate had half let go, sheared right across in one area. It was still held by another part of the structure, and we took the mizzen staysail off, dropped the mizzen quickly and jibed the boat over just as the entire fabrication blew to bits. Dean Phipps, to his great credit, climbed this mast, which was waving around like a piece of spaghetti. He climbed right out the bottom spreader on the leeward side, tied a rope up there, and we tied it down to the deck. Suddenly the rig was safe again. Mast could have gone over at any time with him up there.
It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and while continuing to sail, the crew set about repairing the damage. A piece of metal plate cut from the engine mounting was bent into shape with a hydraulic jack and bolted to the hull to replace the broken chain plate.
And from that time onwards, this boat was sailed at about 90% efficiency, sometimes down as far as 50%. Probably we slowed right down when we had to. We just had to finish. It didn't matter a damn whether we finished first or not. We had to finish.
But finish first they did, though not until Steinlager 2 and Fisher and Paykel had treated millions of viewers all over the world to another thrilling match race.
Deep down, we wanted to win every damn section. We didn't believe it would ever happen. I mean, it's like a dream come true. But as we got closer to the finish, the same old feeling came back again. There's no way those guys are going to get past us if we can possibly help it.